Enjoy all your favorite sports like never before at BetMGM. Sign up using code CHAMPION and your first wager is risk-free up to $1,000. Visit BetMGM.com for terms and conditions. 21 years of age or older to wager. Virginia only. New customer offer. All promotions are subject to qualification and eligibility requirements. Rewards issued as non-withdrawable free bets or site credit. Free bets expire 7 days from issuance. Please gamble responsibly. Gambling problem? Call 1-888-532-3500.
Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of History You Didn't Know But Should. I'm Ray.
And I'm Chris.
And in honor of Halloween, we're going to go back and look at probably one of the most iconic symbols of Halloween, and that is the jack-o'-lantern. And Chris, I don't normally do jack-o'-lanterns because I'm not artistic, and it would be embarrassing if I did one. But I do have pumpkins out in front of my house. What about you? Do you carve the jack-o'-lantern every year?
Yeah, so I don't because of the same thing. I am not an artiste, but I do find the carving of jack-o'-lanterns to be extremely unique just because of the creativity. And Ray, it used to be you would cut out 2 triangles for the eyes, and then you just kind of carve up a mouth. But Ray, these people are doing some amazing designs with these jack-o'-lanterns now, and it fascinates me. So we're not the creative ones, but we do get to experience a lot of the benefits of watching those who are creative.
Yeah, I mean, I remember growing up, we did jack-o'-lanterns every year, and they were like you described, 2 triangles for the eyes, a mouth with some teeth in it, I guess you could say, and maybe a triangle for the nose. But that was really all there was. Really wasn't much to it. I've seen ones recently look like they've got something in their mouth, or really detailed scenes carved out on the front of it, the likenesses of various people. Always very fascinating. So we think about the jack-o'-lantern, you're thinking about something that has become synonymous with Halloween in the United States. You go ride down the road and you see Halloween pumpkins, these jack-o'-lanterns there on the steps of people's homes and all of that story. However, the backstory of the jack-o'-lantern is quite interesting because of how it sort of began. It goes all the way back, maybe several thousand years. It goes all the way back to European culture, where they would carve faces in various types of round, I don't know what you call it, gourds or turnips even. They used basically anything they could carve in order to make a face in it or whatever. But of course, that's come down to us and ultimately reached the pumpkin.
A couple of things is we always assume jack-o'-lanterns go with pumpkins, but really that doesn't become a pumpkin thing until it makes its way here to America, because the pumpkin is kind of native to America. And the story that we're going to talk about today basically has Irish roots. And if anybody thinks about Irish, usually potatoes and turnip, kind of where you see. So you can imagine how that's transferred from a potato to a turnip and now to a pumpkin. But just as Halloween has these connotations of being entranced with evil and with darkness and ghost and spooky things, Ray, it's the same thing with how the jack-o'-lantern comes into place, because while they've been making jack-o'-lanterns at Halloween for centuries, it has its origination from an Irish myth about a guy whose name was Stingy Jack, and according to the story, the devil gets involved. And it's a pretty cool story how it comes about and how we still participate in it today.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those stories that, I've only read one version of it. The version we're going to talk about today, I think, is probably the only version I've read. And at the college, I used to teach a class with a colleague called Myths and Legends. And the jack-o'-lantern, or the history of jack-o'-lantern, was one of those topics we would talk about in Myths and Legends. And we wouldn't just simply talk about that. We would also talk about ancient mythology and all of that. But the students always got excited when we came to ghosts and pumpkins and Bigfoots and all this kind of stuff, because that's what students like. But the story of Stingy Jack, there's apparently different versions of it. As you could certainly understand, as it comes down through time as something of oral tradition. But basically what this story shows, I think, well, before we get to the moral of the story, let's talk about the story. I think I was jumping ahead there a little bit, but according to the story, this man called Stingy Jack invited the devil to have a drink with him. Now, Chris, I don't know about you, but I don't think I'm going to be inviting the devil to do anything with me anytime soon or ever.
No, I mean, that's the thing. And add to that, first of all, he's inviting the devil to drink. And then Stingy Jack, being just like his name says, being stingy, he doesn't want to pay for his drink. And so he decides the best thing that he can do is convince the devil to pay for his drink. And the way that, and we have to keep this in mind, that this is a legend, this is a myth, that's what this is. So people don't need to get hooked into the story and think, well, that didn't happen. That didn't happen. As you mentioned, there's a moral to the story. It's a fable. It's a myth. And so Stingy Jack not wanting to pay for his drink, he decides what he's going to do is be able to convince the devil to turn himself into a coin, so that Jack would always have a coin in his pocket to buy his drink and also to buy the devil's drink. Now, usually, Ray, it's the other way around. If you start thinking about religious overtones where the devil encourages people to do something that the devil wants them to do. But in this story, it is Stingy Jack being able to convince the devil that he needs to turn himself into a coin, which the devil does. And then Stingy Jack decides that he'll kind of keep the coin in his pocket. He'll hold on to it because he's stingy, and he puts it into his pocket next to a silver cross, which prevents the devil from changing back into his original form. So just the beginning of this is just weird. And I mean, you should have known something was coming by the guy's name, Stingy Jack.
He didn't want to pay for his drink, so he got the devil to pay for it with himself. Then he holds the devil captive in his pocket. I think it's about a year in the story or something like that. And the idea was, when it came time to remove the cross so that the devil could turn back into his original form, Stingy Jack made a, quote, deal with the devil, in which if I let you turn back to your original form and I happen to die in the next few months, you won't claim my soul. So I guess he thinks he's got a good deal going here. He got a free drink, and he's got a get out of jail free card from the devil for at least a year. I mean, this is weird. I mean, but like you said, this is not to be taken as history. This is fantasy. This is a myth. Second, the next year, a year later, Stingy Jack is up to it again. This time he convinces the devil to climb a tree to pick a piece of fruit. Now, you would think at this point the devil wouldn't trust Stingy Jack, but he apparently doesn't.
Yeah, and add to that, the devil is pretty powerful because he's able to convince a lot of people to do a lot of things. But in this story, the devil's also very gullible, and he climbs up into the tree. And as he's climbed up into the tree to get that piece of fruit for Jack all of a sudden then carves the sign of the cross into the tree's bark, which now is going to keep the devil up in the tree. And so now you have the devil up in the tree, and Jack makes a deal and basically says, listen, you're not going to be able to come down until you stay away from me for 10 more years. So the issue seems to be in this story that Stingy Jack thinks he has control, but Ray must not have control because he's constantly making a deal with the devil to leave him alone. Now, that part of the story is very confusing, because if Jack has this much power, how is it that the devil is still exerting so much power on him that Jack is having to find creative ways to keep the devil off of him?
Yeah, and he just and like I said, he He gets the devil to pay for his drink, so he's stingy there. And then he gets the devil to climb a tree to get him some fruit, so he's stingy there. I mean, Jack's just not really going to do anything for himself in the story. He gets the devil to do all the work, and each time the devil, as you said, is trapped by Jack. But eventually, after 10 years, Jack dies. And as it goes, when Jack dies and his soul crosses into the next life, he goes to heaven. And according to the mythology, God says, nope, you're not welcome here. Go away. So he's sent away. And of course, usually what that means is, if you're not welcome in heaven, there's only one other place for you. And so the devil, however, refuses to accept him as well, because the devil is still mad about the coin and the tree. So the devil will have nothing to do with him and would not allow him to enter hell, which would seem to me to be a good thing. But the image here is one that, Stingy Jack has now died, and now he really doesn't have a place to call home.
And it's kind of in that, I guess you could say, purgatory, if you would have looked at it into the Irish Catholic, religion form here. You have this individual that is now just wandering. And the rest of the story basically says that the devil not wanting him in hell, God not wanting him in heaven. So the devil basically sends Stingy Jack, into the night, and all he gives him is a burning coal. And can't hold on to the burning coal because it's hot. And so Jack puts the coal into a carved out turnip that allows him to have a light, kind of, if you think about a lantern that shows the way, paints a path. And so Jack has this coal in this carved out turnip, and he's just walking the streets, walking the hills, walking the valleys. Jack's everywhere. And, and then people begin to claim that they would see this ghostly figure that is just kind of walking with this lantern, if you will. And that's how we get the term Jack of the Lantern. And then it just basically comes Jack-o'-lantern. And, if you think about that, these people were scared of Jack-o'-lantern. Yep. They were scared of Jack because, first of all, he was stingy and he had made a deal with the devil. And these people didn't want anything to do with Stingy Jack. They didn't want anything to do with the devil. And so they would carve these scary faces into their turnips or into their potatoes, and they would put them in their windows, hoping that if Stingy Jack did come by, he'd see the scary lantern, the scary figure, and would get scared, and he'd keep on his path, and he would keep on going away. And so that's how you had the original putting lanterns, if you will, in front of people's homes, was to scare off the evil spirits.
Yeah, to keep the evil spirits away and to keep Jack away. And of course, like you said, a lot of times, especially in places like Ireland, this was a turnip or maybe even a potato that was carved out, and they would put the little light in there, and they would often carve a scary face into it. But as you mentioned earlier, immigrants to the United States would bring this tradition to the Americas, and they would eventually adopt the pumpkin. And thus you have jack-o'-lanterns really turned into the pumpkins as we think of a jack-o'-lantern today. I'm trying to think what a jack-o'-lantern made out of a turnip would have looked like. And Chris, that is the stuff nightmares are made out of. I cannot see the children gathering the children around the table to carve one of those things.
Well, and that's the other thing that goes into this, is you would gather them around to carve these things, and then it can become a religious symbol in a way in which you're encouraging your children. We're going to create these things to scare away the bad people, the bad ghosts, the bad spirits. And the thing is, they thought that this guy was endlessly wandering the earth for a resting place. I mean, that's what he's doing. He's wandering. He's looking for a home. Heaven doesn't want him. Hell doesn't want him. So he's just wandering. And people were scared. And they didn't want him in their home, but they also didn't want their children to turn out to be a Stingy Jack or a Stingy Jill. They don't want them to take on those same attributes and those same traits. And so as they're carving this this symbol, it's a reminder we're going to ward off the evil spirits. But also, let me tell you the story of what happens when you make a deal with the devil.
Yeah. So getting back to the moral of the story, don't be like Stingy Jack. Don't be someone, number one, who's stingy, always looking out for himself. But I think there also has to be something there about not, making a deal with the devil. Because ultimately, when you make a deal with the devil, what happens? You don't win. And I think that's part of the moral of the story as well. Now, of course, most people today who put jack-o'-lanterns on their front porch, they're not scared of Stingy Jack coming up into their house or evil spirits coming into their house or whatever. It's more now of a tradition, more of a fun thing that people do. But of course, jack-o'-lanterns take off in American culture. By the mid 1800s, you're seeing it in American literature. Nathaniel Hawthorne mentions it, and other writings and stuff mentioned the jack-o'-lantern. I think in the 1980s, there was or maybe 70s, but definitely 1980s or 70s, there was a horror movie. I know your favorite kind of movie, Chris. There was a horror movie called, I think it was called The Pumpkin or something. Then it was basically the idea that Pumpkinhead or something like that. But basically you had this jack-o'-lantern, this person with a jack-o'-lantern for the head. They went around killing everybody. So the image of the jack-o'-lantern holds. And even though for most people now it's fun, it still has a place in the horror genre even today.
Well, and I think once again, if you start looking at this whole concept, you mentioned in the 1800s, we start to get these nursery rhymes that starts to be developed, and in one of those nursery rhymes, you have a poem that is referred to as the Master Jack-o'-lantern, and it is showing of a wicked, deceiving boy, and it is designed to teach children to not be like Stingy Jack, as you mentioned. So I think this is the beauty of all of these holidays. We walk around and we become so accustomed to seeing these things. But it's important to not just see them, but to talk about them, because I think about it with my kids and all. If we're carving a pumpkin, or if we're doing something like that, what a great opportunity to use these stories in a moral way, to be able to encourage children. Here's the reason that we do this. It's fun for us. It's entertaining. It's creative. It's a way to spruce up the home for Halloween. But there's a story, and the story is, as you mentioned, the moral, always the same. Always do right. Always do good to other people, and surround yourself with goodness and not evil. So while a lot of people become fascinated with going to these haunted attractions, these haunted hay rides and these things in the woods, these places of terror, things I'm not interested in. But they go to these things wanting a good scare. But it's designed for enjoyment, right? It's designed to, to celebrate the season. But at the end of the day, Halloween is another reminder to us to put on good values, to be good people, and to make a good difference in this world. And I think sometimes we forget that because we get inundated with candy and costumes, and we forget the option of being good.
Yeah, and not only is it used for, we're thinking now jack-o'-lanterns, but also pumpkins in a broader sense for Thanksgiving. For Halloween, we also see it used around Thanksgiving as well. In fact, I found one factoid, so to speak, that said in 2018, more than 1 billion tons of pumpkins were harvested in the United States. That's a lot of pumpkins, a lot of jack-o'-lanterns potentially.
And one other thing, this just came to me, and our listeners can come back if I'm wrong, but I had a agriculture teacher tell me this the other day, that the insides of the pumpkin, when you go and you clean out the pumpkin, that is actually healthy for you. All that stuff is healthy. But so here's the other thing, Ray. Think about this. As you're carving jack-o'-lantern, you're also, and if you eat the insides of it, you're putting something good into your body. You're helping have a healthy living with your body, while also telling the story of how to have a healthy, value-driven life also. So there's a lot of good with this. And this is the reason we have this podcast, right? History you didn't know, but should. Why do we carve pumpkins? People thought, well, we carve them because that's how I did it when I was a kid. That's how, our parents did it when they were kids. But no, there's a reason behind it. And there's always value in knowing the rest of the story.
And you know what that means, Chris, what you were talking about, this ag teacher told you about the healthy nature of the pumpkin. You know what the good news is there? That means pumpkin pie is good for you.
It really is, if you have a whole thing of whipped cream on it.
Yeah. I mean, you can't go wrong with pumpkin pie. I mean, it's healthy now. We know that, so yeah, I don't think that will wash.
No, but it does allow us to be reminded that everything we do, there's a story, there's a rhyme or reason to it. And so I hope that our listeners enjoy Halloween. I hope they have a great time getting dressed up. As you know, I don't like spooky stuff. I don't like scary stuff. Halloween is not my seasonal event. I prefer to stay away from it. Not because of anything, except I just don't like horror. I just don't like scary things. But for our listeners who do, go carve you a really good jack-o'-lantern. Send us a link showing us your creative jack-o'-lantern. Maybe, Ray, maybe there's somebody out there that could do a jack-o'-lantern of us. Wouldn't that be scary?
Gosh, talking about horror. Oh dear. That's a horror movie within itself.
It is, but I challenge our listeners to go out there and carve a jack-o'-lantern for us and uplink, send a picture so we can post it on all of our social media to kind of tie into the history of the jack-o'-lantern.
Yeah. Well, if you have a picture of your jack-o'-lantern to send us, you can send it to our email at historyyousshouldknow@gmail.com. That's history, the letter you should know @gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter. So there's the information in case you want that. We encourage you to share this podcast with friends and family. You can find us on Sounder FM, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeart. Until next time, I'm Ray.
And I'm Chris.
We'll talk to you later.